Welcome everybody. My name's Autumn. This evening we're going to be doing a yin class, probably about 40 minutes or so. We will, towards the end, be using like a wall or the back of your couch or anything like that. So if you aren't already near a wall or something, you may want to reposition yourself before we get started and just get close to one. We'll be using it just for some support with a pose at the end. If you haven't practiced yin before, just a quick warning, we do hold poses for a pretty long time, anywhere up to 5 minutes. So I always like to say that at the beginning, just in case anybody's newer to a yin practice. So with that, we can get started. Just go ahead and take any easy seated position on the mat. I'll be kind of looking at my watch throughout practice tonight so I can keep track of the time and so I can time how long we're in each posture. So when you're ready, just find that easy seated position and we'll settle in for a few moments of grounding and meditation. So start to turn the senses and turn the awareness inside of the body as you let the other distractions of your day, maybe the other distractions in your household, just let those fade away. We're taking these next 40 minutes or so as time for ourselves. If you haven't already, start to bring some awareness to your breath. No need to make any changes with your own natural rhythm. Just notice and accept wherever you are for the moment. As you breathe into that belly space, maybe you feel the spine growing a little taller as the shoulders move down and away from the ears. Take one more full, slow breath. And let it out. Gently begin to open the eyes. And we'll prepare for our first yin pose. So bring the feet out in front, bottom of the feet come together. They can be closer to the body for a deeper stretch or maybe farther away. Whatever serves you best. When we have the feet touching out in front of us, find that tall spine, root down through the sits bones, pull the core in, and then when we're ready, we're going to make our way into butterfly pose by hinging forward at the hips, letting the neck and the head hang down heavy. So we're going to hold this pose for 3 minutes. So when you find a variation, find that position that feels good for you, settle in here, sink in. know that while we're holding any of these yin postures, that we can always come back to that rhythm of the breath. We'll allow that to guide us through both movements and through the stillness. Try to allow the face to soften. Relax the jaw. We've just passed the halfway mark. So keep that heart sinking down. Take your final few rounds of breath here. And then moving really slowly to avoid any dizziness. Just roll up through the spine. Keep the chin tucked. Coming upright. And then allowing the head to come up last. You can bring the knees together. We're going to bring the feet around and sink into a child's pose here as a counter posture. So bringing the toes together, the big toes together, the knees can come out wide, and just sink that heart down. So for this counter pose, we're just gonna hold our child's pose for 1 minute. So allow the chin or the forehead to rest on the mat as the arms stretch long out in front. On your next inhale, come up back onto all fours into a tabletop position. Quickly check in and make sure that the knees are stacked right under the hips. And then for our next yin pose, we're going to move into a melted heart. So for this pose, keep the lower body right where it is. Keep those knees under the hips. And then start to walk the hands out in front, melting that heart down towards the mat. So we're going to get an opposite stretch here in the back than we did with the butterfly pose. So the chin, one cheek, or the forehead can rest on the mat. We'll hold this posture for 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when it's halfway through. So if you are resting on one side, you can turn to the other side and feel balanced there. If you are resting on one cheek, we're about halfway through, so go ahead and turn on to the other cheek. If you have your chin or your forehead resting on the mat, just stay right where you are. We have another minute and 30 seconds. Take your final breath here in melted heart. And then when you're ready, begin to lift the chest, walk the hands back under the shoulders. We'll take the knees wide again and sink back into a child's pose. Again, holding this for just 1 minute. If the shoulders are feeling a little sore from the last pose, you can bring them down to rest along the side body. We have just a few more moments here in our child's pose. With the next inhale, begin to lift the heart, coming back through tabletop. And then for our next pose, we're making our way all the way onto the belly. So just let both hip points sink down. We're going for a shoulder opener next. So let's start on the right side. We're going to bring the right arm long out into a T, so at a 90-degree angle to the body. And let the inside of the arm and the shoulder press down onto the floor. From here, we're going to roll over on towards the right side, so rolling onto the right hip. The left hip is going to lift off of the mat. You can let that right cheek rest down here. If this feels too intense on the shoulder, you can also take this pose up against a wall, just placing that inner part of the arm alongside of the wall and getting that same shoulder opening. So whatever version feels best for you. If you have that hip lifted and you don't feel enough of a stretch, you can also bend that top knee and allow it to press into the mat. So you can let the cheek sink down. I'm just gonna start the timer here. We're gonna hold this for 3 minutes. If you find that your mind is wandering off or thoughts are coming up, it's okay to let that happen. And just don't get too attached to any one thought or one train of thought. Gently pull yourself back to the present and back to the breath. To make your way out of this pose, just gently return to the belly, bringing that left hip down to the mat. We'll quickly visit a Sphinx pose here, pressing the forearms into the mat and just lengthening that spine just for a quick moment before we move on to the other side. Allow the shoulders to sink down and away from the ears here. And see if you notice any difference between the right side body and the left side body right now. Since we did that shoulder opener on the right, maybe that side feels a little looser, a little more open. Take one more breath in your Sphinx pose. And then drop that heart back down to the mat. We'll move over onto the left, extending the left arm out to a 90-degree angle, or again, you have the option to take this pose, this shoulder opener, against the wall. When you have the inside of the arm pressing down into the mat, start to lift that right hip up, rolling over onto the left hip. So you can keep the legs long like this. If you need a bit of a deeper stretch, you can bend that top leg and open up that knee, kind of pressing into the mat and deepening the posture. I'll start my watch, and again, we'll hold this for about 3 minutes. Continue to keep the mind on the present moment, on the breath. With your next exhale, start to draw that right hip back down to the mat, coming onto the belly. Draw the left arm back in, and we'll revisit that Sphinx pose for just a moment, pressing the forearms into the mat, lifting through that heart space. Exhale, drop the forehead down to the mat, and then we'll just roll over onto the back. Once you get onto the back, you can pull the knees into the chest, giving them a nice squeeze here. And then bringing the knees to a 90-degree angle. We'll bring the arms out wide again into that T and prepare to move into our spinal twist. So let's drop both knees over to one side. You have the option to add the hand on top of the thigh to add a little bit of weight here. And then to deepen this twist, you can take the gaze over to the opposite side. making sure that you're keeping both shoulders pressing into the mat. We have just a few more moments left on this side. Take a few more breaths. And then on your next inhale, draw the knees back into the center, pulling them into the heart space. Again, noticing any differences on one side versus the other. And then when you're ready for the next side, bringing the knees into that 90-degree angle, bringing the arms into a T, and dropping them over to the opposite side, maybe adding that hand on top of the knee for some extra weight. An option to gaze out towards the opposite arm, deepening that twist. And we'll be on this side again for 3 minutes. we're just over halfway through. With the next inhale, guide the knees back to center, pulling them into the chest, maybe rocking from side to side and massaging the lower back. We have one more pose before we move into our final resting pose, our Shavasana. So this is where you'll need some wall space or the back of the couch, just something to support the legs. So we're going to come into a hip opener for the inner hips, a straddle along the wall here, or like I said, the back of the couch. So to get into this pose, I like to bring one hip right up against the wall, lower myself down onto the ground, and then bring both legs up onto that wall. So I'll start with the legs straight, the feet extended up, and then gently start to bring the feet out wide, coming into that straddle. So find an edge for you where you're feeling a good stretch on the inner thighs and the inner hips. It might look different for every person, so take a moment to kind of play around and find that edge for you. We'll be in this posture for 3 minutes as well, so maybe bring one hand to the belly and one hand to the heart to really tap in to the rhythm of the breath. Notice if you're holding tension in the forehead, the jaw, the fists. See if you have any room to soften. We have less than a minute left here in this pose. So for these last few seconds, these last few breaths, really notice that rhythm. Feel the rise and the fall of the belly. Notice if that rhythm has changed since our beginning meditation. When you're ready to come out of this pose, you can use the fingertips to gently guide the legs back together, bending the knees and then rolling over onto one side to make your way out of the posture. If you've moved away from your mat, make your way back to the mat, back onto the back body. We'll set up for our final resting pose for the practice, our final Shavasana. If you have any movements that you need to get out of the way before then, just take a few seconds to do that now. Listening to whatever the body is telling you. And then when you've done that, when you're prepared for that rest, stretch the legs out long, allow the arms to relax alongside the body. Allow the eyes to close and settle into your Shavasana. Bring some awareness back into the body. And take a final 3 deep, slow breaths. When you finish that 3rd breath, make your way over onto one side. And then eventually pressing up into a seated position. We'll bring the hands to meet at heart center. And then draw the thumb knuckles up to the 3rd eye to close out our practice. We'll bow and say namaste. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a good rest of your night.